Hey guys, tonight we begin not with a storm at sea, but with something far more devastating. Family betrayal in the cutthroat world of 1990s hip-hop. Because believe it or not, Shakespeare knew that the music industry, whether it's the 1500s or the era of baggy jeans and boom baps, has always been about power, loyalty, and what happens when ambition corrupts blood. From Manhattan record labels to a Caribbean island exile, this is The Tempest reimagined with turntables instead of magic spells and redemption mixtapes instead of revenge plots. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year is 1997, and the Caribbean Sea stretches endlessly beneath a sky that's beginning to betray its beauty. The water, moments ago a crystalline turquoise mirror, reflecting the late afternoon sun, now churns with an unsettling restlessness. On the horizon, clouds gather like an audience waiting for a performance to begin, dark, heavy, pregnant with violence. The luxury yacht Milano Records cuts through the waves, its white hull gleaming, its chrome railings catching the dying light. This is no ordinary vessel. The deck is equipped with state-of-the-art sound systems, satellite phones mounted in waterproof cases, and a crew dressed in matching black polo shirts embroidered with gold lettering. This is the ship of winners, of moguls, of men who've conquered the music industry and now sail through international waters as if they owned the ocean itself. On the main deck, Antonio De Luca stands with his legs planted wide, a posture of ownership and confidence. His Hugo Boss suit jacket is draped over a deck chair, his silk shirt unbuttoned at the collar, a thick gold chain resting against his chest. His hair is slicked back with too much gel, and his Versace sunglasses reflect the darkening sky. Antonio is the CEO of Milano Records, the man who sits in the corner office that once belonged to someone else. He holds a champagne flute in one hand and a Motorola flip phone in the other, barking orders to someone back in Miami about distribution numbers and radio play. Beside him, his brother Sebastian lounges in a deck chair, feet up, a Cuban cigar smoldering between his fingers. Sebastian wears a Tommy Hilfiger tracksuit, the red, white, and blue, instantly recognizable, the uniform of 1990s hip-hop excess. He's flipping through a copy of the Source magazine, occasionally chuckling at something he reads. Sebastian has always been the muscle to Antonio's brain, the enforcer who ensures that contracts get signed and problems disappear. Further along the deck, Alonso Martinez paces nervously. Alonso is the head of Urban Groove Distribution, a powerhouse in the industry, a man whose network moves millions of units from pressing plants to record stores across America. He's dressed more conservatively, Polo Ralph Lauren khakis, a crisp white button-down Sperry boat shoes. But there's something haunted in his eyes, something that suggests the champagne in his glass isn't settling well in his stomach. He keeps glancing at the sky, then at his watch, a gold Rolex that feels too heavy on his wrist. With Alonso is his son Fernando, barely 22 years old, fresh out of USC's business school with an MBA and enough ambition to fuel a rocket. Fernando represents the new generation. He wears baggy JNCO jeans, a vintage Wu-Tang Clan t-shirt under an open flannel, and Timberland boots that have never seen actual work. His Sony Discman is clipped to his belt, headphones around his neck, probably loaded with a burned CD full of underground tracks. He's been recording everything on his new Sony Handycam, capturing what he calls documentary footage of the industry's elite at play. There's also Gonzalo, Antonio's right-hand man, the Q who actually keeps Milano Records running while Antonio takes credit. Gonzalo is older, graying at the temples, wearing reading glasses that hang from a chain around his neck. He's studied the weather reports, and he doesn't like what he's seeing. Every few minutes he steps into the cabin to check the radar, his face growing more concerned each time he emerges. Two other executives complete the party, Adrian and Francisco, both E&R representatives, talent scouts who built careers finding the next big thing. They're younger, hungry, dressed in designer streetwear, Nautica and Fubu logos displayed prominently. They're the type who talk too loud, laugh too hard, and treat every moment as a networking opportunity. The yacht also carries its crew, men hired to maintain the vessel and serve the executives. Among them is a grizzled captain who's been sailing these waters for 30 years, and a young deckhand who keeps checking the rigging with increasingly worried glances at the sky. The storm doesn't announce itself gradually. It arrives like a track drop, sudden, overwhelming, impossible to ignore. One moment the yacht is sailing through choppy but manageable seas, and the next, the sky has opened up with a fury that seems personal, targeted, vengeful. Rain slams down in sheets, so thick it's like sailing through a waterfall. The wind screams, a sound that drowns out even Antonio's shouting. Waves rise like skyscrapers, walls of dark water that lift the yacht and drop it with bone-jarring crashes. Lightning splits the sky in jagged white tears, each flash illuminating faces frozen in terror. Thunder doesn't just sound, it vibrates through the deck, through bones, through souls. Fernando's Handycam captures chaotic footage, the deck tilting at impossible angles, champagne bottles rolling and shattering, someone's Gucci loafers sliding across the polished wood, hands gripping railings with white-knuckled desperation. The audio picks up screaming, prayers in English and Spanish, the captain's voice trying to maintain order over the howling wind. Sebastian's cigar is ripped from his fingers and disappears into the maelstrom. Adrian loses his footing and slides across the deck until Francisco catches him. Alonso wraps his arms around Fernando, both of them drenched, hair plastered to their faces, designer clothes now just heavy, useless fabric. Antonio tries to reach his satellite phone, but a wave crashes over the railing and sweeps it away, along with several deck chairs and someone's Louis Vuitton overnight bag. The yacht's sophisticated sound system shorts out with a spectacular shower of sparks, speakers crackling and dying. The satellite dish mounted on the upper deck tears free and cartwheels into the churning sea. Gonzalo, ever the practical one, is helping the crew secure loose equipment, his expensive clothes ruined, his glasses fogged with salt spray. He's shouting something about life vests, about emergency protocols, but his voice is swallowed by the storm's roar. The captain fights the wheel, his weathered face illuminated by the instrument panels. The radar screen shows nothing but chaos, static, a wall of red that shouldn't exist in these waters. This storm came from nowhere, appeared like something conjured rather than formed. In his 3 decades of sailing, he's never seen anything like it. The compass spins uselessly. The GPS flickers and dies. Every piece of modern technology, All the expensive equipment that was supposed to make navigation foolproof has become worthless. The yacht groans, a deep sound of stressed metal and fiberglass. Water pours over the railings with each wave, flooding the deck. Francisco is crying, mascara from his carefully groomed appearance running down his face. Adrian clutches a railing and vomits into the storm. Sebastian, all his tough guy posturing stripped away, is praying to a god he probably hasn't addressed since childhood. And through it all, Antonio stands transfixed, staring at something in the distance. Through the sheets of rain, through the chaos, he sees it, an island. A dark silhouette against the lightning-torn sky, appearing and disappearing with each flash. Something about that island makes his blood run cold, though he can't explain why. Something familiar. Something he's tried very hard to forget. The yacht lurches violently. There's a horrible grinding sound as the hull strikes something beneath the waves, rocks, a reef, the bones of the earth rising up to punish them. Fernando's handycam flies from his grip and smashes against a bulkhead. Alonso loses his hold on his son, both of them sliding across the flooding deck. Then, with a final explosive crack of thunder that sounds like the sky itself breaking apart, everything goes dark. From the island, perched on a cliff overlooking the turbulent sea, a young woman watches the storm with tears streaming down her face. This is Miranda De Luca, though she hasn't used that last name in 12 years. She's 20 years old, beautiful in a way that hasn't been touched by the industry's exploitation. Natural hair and long braids adorned with shells and beads, wearing a flowing silk dress in earth tones, her feet bare, multiple silver rings on her fingers, a small tattoo of a treble clef on her wrist. "Please," she whispers, though she knows her father can hear her even over the storm. "Please stop this. You're going to kill them." Behind her, the island compound rises like something from a fevered dream. It's part recording studio, part tropical villa, part technological fortress. The main house is built into the cliff face, all natural wood and open spaces, with solar panels on the roof and satellite dishes pointed at the sky. Massive speakers are mounted everywhere, weatherproofed and powerful. Cables snake between buildings. Monitors glow behind windows. This is where 12 years of exile and genius have created something unprecedented. The studio complex features multiple buildings connected by covered walkways. The main recording studio has floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean, mixing boards that would make any producer weep with envy, vintage equipment alongside cutting-edge digital technology. There's a massive vinyl collection organized in climate-controlled storage, walls covered with platinum records from another life, equipment from the golden age of hip-hop production, SP1, 200 drum machines, MPC 3000 samplers, Akai synthesizers, Technics 1200 turntables. Everywhere there's evidence of both technology and nature coexisting. Solar panels and wind turbines provide power. Rainwater collection systems feed into purification units. A garden grows lush with tropical fruits and vegetables. But there's also fiber optic cable, satellite uplinks, computer servers humming in air-conditioned rooms. And standing at the edge of the cliff, arms raised, dreadlocks whipping in the wind, wearing a vintage Stussy jacket over a faded Public Enemy t-shirt, cargo pants, and Adidas superstars, is Prospero De Luca, the man who built this kingdom, the wizard of this modern age. Prospero's face is weathered but strong, his beard streaked with gray, his dark eyes intense and focused. Around his neck hangs multiple chains, gold, silver, some with pendants that look like they might be Ethiopian crosses, ankhs, symbols of power from various traditions. His fingers dance in the air as if he's conducting an orchestra, and in a way, he is. The storm responds to his movements. "Not kill them, baby girl," Prospero says, his voice a rich baritone that cuts through the wind. His accent is pure Brooklyn, never lost, despite the years away. Just humble them. Just bring them to where they need to be. "This isn't right," Miranda insists, gripping his arm. "Whatever they did to you, to us, this isn't the answer. Violence, revenge, it's the old way. You taught me better than this." Prospero looks at his daughter, and something softens in his expression. He lowers his arms slowly, and as he does, the storm begins to ease. The wind drops from a scream to a howl, from a howl to a strong breeze. The rain lightens. The waves, while still powerful, lose their apocalyptic fury. "You're right," he says quietly. "You're right, Miranda. The island taught us better. The music taught us better." He makes a final gesture, and the storm releases its grip entirely. Though the yacht has already been driven onto the reef, already run aground on the white sand beach below. They alive, all of them. Not a hair on their heads harmed, not a thread of their overpriced clothes damaged. But they're here now, on my island in my world, and it's time for some truth. Miranda wipes her eyes, looking down at the beach, where figures are already staggering from the wrecked yacht, collapsing on the sand. Who are they? Why now, after all these years? Prospero puts his arm around his daughter's shoulders, and together they watch the survivors begin to gather themselves. That, my dear, is a story that starts 12 years ago, when I was still stupid enough to trust blood over business, family, over instinct. That down there, that's Antonio De Luca, my baby brother, the man who stole everything I built. The transition from 1997 back to 1985 happens in Prospero's mind as he stands on that cliff. Miranda notices the distant look in her father's eyes, the way his jaw tightens when he speaks Antonio's name. She's heard fragments of the story over the years, but never the whole truth. Her father has always protected her from the ugliest parts of their history. Prospero De Luca had been a king in 1985, not just successful, legendary. He'd started Tempest Records in a basement in Brooklyn with nothing but a 4-track recorder, a crate of his father's vinyl, and an ear that could hear hits before they existed. While other labels were still trying to figure out if hip-hop was a fad, Prospero was signing artists who would define the genre. He produced tracks that became anthems. He discovered talent in subway stations and street corners. He built an empire on beats and rhymes and the raw truth of urban poetry. The Tempest Records offices occupied 3 floors in Manhattan by 1984. Gold and platinum records lined the walls. Prospero's roster included legends, pioneers who transformed music. He was more than a businessman. He was an artist himself, a producer whose signature sound was instantly recognizable. The Tempest beat, the Tempest touch. Magic captured in grooves and samples. But success breeds envy, and blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. Antonio had been Prospero's right hand, his little brother, the one who handled business, while Prospero focused on the music. Antonio had the MBA, the connections, the smooth talk that opened doors. Prospero trusted him completely. That trust was a knife waiting to find his back. Miranda was 8 years old when the betrayal came. She remembers her father's face that night, the shock, the hurt, The rage. Antonio had been moving money, forging documents, making deals with distributors like Alonso Martinez to redirect profits. He'd been building alliances with other labels, promising them Tempest's roster if they supported his coup. He convinced the board, the investors, even some of the artists that Prospero was unstable, too artistic, not business-minded enough for the corporate era of hip-hop. The takeover was surgical and brutal. One day Prospero owned Tempest Records. The next he was locked out of his own building, served with injunctions and restraining orders, buried under lawsuits he couldn't afford to fight. Antonio had taken everything: the company, the catalog, the artists, the reputation, even their family name on the building. Prospero could have fought, could have dragged Antonio through courts for years. But he looked at 8-year-old Miranda and made a different choice. He took what little money remained, his daughter, and disappeared. They ended up here on this island that Prospero bought for almost nothing because it was remote, undeveloped, considered worthless. Here he'd built something new, something powerful. Yo, boss, they're all accounted for. A voice breaks Prospero's reverie. From the studio compound, a young man emerges, moving with the fluid grace of a dancer. This is Ariel Wright, 25 years old, his skin dark and beautiful, his head shaved clean, wearing a Coogie sweater in vibrant patterns, cross-colors jeans, and pristine Air Jordans. Multiple gold hoops pierce his ears, and his smile is bright enough to power the island. Ariel is Prospero's protege, his student, his right hand. The young man had washed up on this island 3 years ago, literally, a stowaway on a cargo ship, running from debt, from mistakes, from people who wanted him dead. Prospero found him on the beach, half drowned, and made a deal. Stay and learn, work and grow, and in return, Prospero would teach him everything about production, about music, about power. When the time came for Ariel to leave, he'd be equipped to conquer the industry. Every single one of them? Prospero asks, descending from the cliff toward the studio, Miranda and Ariel flanking him. Down to the last suit-wearing parasite, Ariel confirms, his voice musical even in regular speech. They're scattered along the North Beach, confused as hell, phones dead, yacht trashed. That captain's going to need therapy. And you should see Antonio. Man's having a full existential crisis down there. Good, Prospero says, though Miranda shoots him a disapproving look. What about the others? Fernando and Alonso? Separated from the main group, Ariel reports, consulting a handheld GPS device that's tracking signals Prospero planted on the yacht weeks ago. They're on the South Beach, just the two of them. Father and son bonding time, forced by circumstance. Prospero nods, his mind already working through the next phases of his plan. 12 years he's waited for this moment. 12 years of building power, studying, learning not just music, but technology, psychology, the art of manipulation. The island has been his laboratory, his monastery, his training ground. Now his enemies have been delivered to him like a gift from the universe itself. Miranda, baby, I need you to trust me, Prospero says, stopping to face his daughter. Everything I'm about to do, it's not about revenge. It's about justice. It's about truth. These men need to see what they've become, what their greed has cost. And when it's done, when they understand, maybe we can all heal. Maybe we can all move forward. Miranda searches her father's face, wanting to believe him, but worried about the intensity she sees there. Promise me no one gets hurt. Promise me this is about teaching, not punishing. I promise Prospero says, and he means it. Then he turns to Ariel. All right, let's begin. Phase 2. I want Antonio and his crew to see things, hear things, experience the impossible. Make them believe this island is alive, that karma has an address, and they just showed up at the door. Ariel grins, cracking his knuckles. Time to make some magic, then. Time to show these corporate clowns what real power looks like. He pulls out a controller that looks like a modified Nintendo 64 gamepad, wired to a portable mixing board. I've got the sound system ready, the holograms calibrated, the pyrotechnics staged. This is going to be the performance of a lifetime. As they walk toward the studio, Miranda following reluctantly. The island seems to pulse with anticipation. Every speaker, every hidden camera, every piece of technology waiting to play its part in Prospero's grand production. The North Beach is a stretch of white sand that looks like it belongs in a resort brochure, except for the wrecked yacht listing awkwardly on the reef and the scattered debris that marks the storm's violence. Designer luggage lies half buried in sand. A briefcase is popped open, contracts and business documents fluttering across the beach like white birds. Someone's Oakley sunglasses sit perfectly intact next to a crushed bottle of crystal. Antonio De Luca sits on a piece of driftwood, his Hugo Boss suit soaked through, his slicked back hair now hanging in wet strands around his face. He's staring at his hands like they belong to someone else. For the first time in 12 years, he's completely without control. No phone, no assistant, no power. Just a man on a beach with the taste of salt water and fear in his mouth. Sebastian paces nearby, his Tommy Hilfiger tracksuit covered in sand, his cigar long gone. This is insane, he mutters over and over. Absolutely insane. Storms don't just appear like that. Weather doesn't work that way. Obviously it does, genius, because we just lived through it, Adrian snaps. He's trying to wring water from his Nautica shirt, but it's pointless. Francisco sits next to him, arms wrapped around his knees, rocking slightly, still in shock. Gonzalo has already taken charge of the practical matters. He's organized the crew to salvage what they can from the yacht water bottles, emergency supplies, anything useful. The old captain sits apart from everyone, smoking a cigarette with shaking hands, grateful to be alive but deeply unsettled. In all his years, he's never experienced anything like that storm. It felt personal. It felt targeted. We need to assess our situation, Gonzalo says, his coup training kicking in even in crisis. The yacht's communications are dead. The G-piece is fried. But we're clearly on an island, which means land, which means potential resources and possibly inhabitants. We need to explore, find fresh water, establish shelter. Inhabitants? Antonio laughs, a bitter sound. Look at this place, Gonzalo. It's deserted. We're in the middle of nowhere, and we're screwed. But even as he says it, his eyes scan the tree line, and something nags at him. Something about this island feels familiar, though he can't place why. The tree line is lush and dense palm trees, tropical foliage, vines hanging like curtains. The vegetation is so thick it's impossible to see more than a few feet into the jungle. Birds call from the branches, exotic sounds that remind the stranded executives how far they are from Manhattan's streets and Miami's boardwalks. We should stay on the beach, Francisco says nervously. That's what you're supposed to do, right? Stay visible for rescue planes? With what? Sebastian gestures at the sky. Our emergency beacon is somewhere at the bottom of the ocean. Nobody knows we're here. We were off course when the storm hit. It's this moment, as despair begins to truly settle into the group, that they hear it. Music. Distant at first, but growing clearer. A beat. Hip-hop production, bass-heavy and hypnotic, echoing from somewhere in the jungle. The sound is impossible to ignore. 808 drums. A sample that sounds like it's from a classic soul record. Scratching that could only come from a master DJ. Everyone freezes. Antonio stands slowly from his driftwood seat, his expression shifting from despair to confusion, to something that might be hope. You hear that? Music, Gonzalo confirms. Which means people. Which means we're not alone. The beat continues, pulsing through the air like a heartbeat. It's a track that sounds familiar to all of them. Something in the style of the mid-90s golden era. The kind of production that made Tempest Records legendary. But it's also something new, something they've never heard before, mixing classic boom-bap with modern techniques in a way that shouldn't be possible. We follow it, Antonio decides, his executive instincts returning, carefully. Could be locals, could be other survivors, could be anything. But it's our best shot at getting help. The group begins moving toward the tree line, Gonzalo leading with the captain, Antonio and Sebastian following, the younger executives trailing behind, nervously. They step from bright sunlight into the shaded jungle, and immediately the temperature drops, the air becoming thick with humidity and the smell of earth and growing things. The path isn't obvious, but the music guides them, growing louder, as they push through ferns and past massive tree trunks. Sunlight filters through the canopy in shafts of gold, illuminating butterflies with wings like stained glass and flowers in colors that seem almost artificial in their vibrancy. Then they see them, figures moving through the jungle ahead, glimpsed between trees. Young people dressed in vibrant 1990s streetwear, baggy jeans, oversized jerseys, colorful windbreakers. They move with purpose, carrying what look like boxes of equipment, laughing and talking, completely at ease in this environment. "Hey!" Antonio shouts. "Hey, we need help." The figures pause, turn to look at the executives, and then, and possibly, they vanish. Simply fade away like they were never there, leaving only the music and the rustling of leaves. What the hell? Sebastian breathes. "Heat stroke," Francisco suggests weakly. "We're dehydrated, seeing things." But Adrian is pointing ahead where the jungle is opening into a clearing. The music is loudest here, coming from massive speakers mounted in the trees, weatherproofed and camouflaged but clearly professional equipment. In the center of the clearing sits what looks like a shrine. Turntables set up on a natural stone platform, vinyl records arranged in crates, graffiti art sprayed on smooth rock faces depicting legends of hip-hop, Rakim, KRS-One, Queen Latifah, Tupac, Biggie, faces rendered in vibrant colors. "This is someone's spot," Gonzalo says quietly. "This is intentional. Someone lives here." Antonio approaches the turntables slowly, like they might disappear if he moves too fast. They're real Technics 1200s, the gold standard, perfectly maintained. Records sit ready to play. A mixer rests between them, lights blinking to show it's powered on. But there's no generator visible, no obvious power source. He reaches out to touch one of the turntables, and the moment his fingers make contact, the music stops. Complete silence crashes down like a physical force. Then, from the speakers, a voice deep, processed through effects, echoing through the clearing like the voice of God or a ghost. "Antonio De Luca," the voice says, and Antonio goes pale. "Welcome home, brother." Antonio stumbles backward from the turntables, his face drained of color. The voice reverberates through the clearing, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Sebastian grabs his brother's arm, his own expression showing fear for the first time since they landed. "Who's there?" Antonio shouts at the jungle, at the speakers, at the air itself. "Show yourself." Instead of an answer, the speakers come alive with a new track. This one is different, darker, more aggressive. The bass throbs like a warning, and over it, samples of Antonio's own voice from old interviews play in chopped fragments. Family means nothing in business. You have to be ruthless. Sentiment is weakness. His words from a 1986 interview with Billboard magazine, remixed and looped, turned into an accusation. The graffiti on the rocks begins to change. At first, Antonio thinks it's a trick of the light filtering through the canopy. But no, the images are actually moving, shifting, animated somehow. The faces of hip-hop legends fade and are replaced by images he recognizes from another life. The original Tempest Records logo. Artists he signed and then lost. His father's face, disappointed and stern. And then, most disturbing of all, a portrait of himself and Prospero from 1984. Arms around each other's shoulders, brothers united before the betrayal. "This isn't real," Francisco whispers, backing away. "This is a hallucination. We hit our heads in the storm." But Gonzalo is examining the speakers, the equipment, running his hands along cables that disappear into the trees. It's real. All of it. Someone's operating this. Some kind of sophisticated setup, projection mapping, maybe, or holographic technology. This is millions of dollars worth of equipment hidden in the middle of nowhere. The music shifts again, becoming beautiful and melancholic. A piano sample that Prospero used on one of Tempest Records' biggest hits, a track that went triple platinum in 1985, before everything fell apart. Antonio knows this melody intimately. He used to listen to his brother create it, watching in awe as Prospero transformed vinyl fragments into something transcendent. Through the trees, figures appear again. This time they don't vanish. Young people emerge from the jungle. A dozen of them, maybe more. They're dressed like they stepped out of a music video. Oversized Carl Kani jeans, starter jackets, Fila sneakers, door knocker earrings on the women, Kangol hats on the men. Their movements are choreographed, synchronized, like backup dancers in formation. They don't speak, just watch the executives with expressions that range from curiosity to contempt. "Please," Gonzalo steps forward, hands raised peacefully. "We don't want trouble. Our yacht crashed. We need help, communication equipment, a way to contact the mainland." The young people don't respond verbally, but one of them, a woman with box braids and a TLC-inspired outfit, steps forward and gestures for the group to follow. When Adrian hesitates, she simply turns and walks back into the jungle, confident they'll follow. And they do, because what choice do they have? On the south beach, separated from the main group by a rocky outcropping and dense jungle, Fernando Martinez sits with his father Alonso on the sand. The storm that brought them here has left them both shaken, but unlike the others, their landing was gentler. The waves deposited them on a pristine stretch of beach, their section of the yacht's deck serving as an unintentional life raft. Fernando's Sony Handycam is ruined, waterlogged, and dead. He stares at it like he's lost a limb. That camera documented everything: his entry into the music business, his father's dealings, the lifestyle he'd been so eager to capture, and someday expose. Now it's just expensive trash. We're alive, Alonso says quietly. He's sitting with his knees drawn up, arms wrapped around him, staring at the ocean. That's what matters. We're alive, Fernando. But Fernando hears something in his father's voice, not relief but guilt. Heavy, crushing guilt. Dad, that storm. What were the odds? What were the actual statistical odds of a storm like that appearing out of nowhere in these waters, hitting us specifically? Alonso doesn't answer immediately. When he does, his voice is barely audible over the waves. I've been asking myself that same question, and I keep thinking, maybe it's not odds. Maybe it's karma. Fernando looks at his father sharply. What are you talking about? This island, Alonso gestures vaguely at the jungle behind them. I think I know where we are. And if I'm right, he trails off, shaking his head. There was a man 12 years ago. A producer, a genius. He owned a label called Tempest Records. He had a brother, Antonio De Luca, the man on the yacht with us. Antonio, we helped him. Me and my distribution company. We helped Antonio take everything from his brother. Fernando has never heard this story. His father never talks about the past, about the deals that built Urban Groove Distribution. Why? Why would you do that? Money, Alonso says simply, bitterly. Antonio offered exclusive distribution rights for all of Tempest's catalog if we backed his takeover. It was too good a deal to pass up. We testified in corporate hearings that Prospero De Luca was unstable, that he was mismanaging funds. We lied. We destroyed a good man for percentage points and distribution rights. The confession hangs in the air between them. Fernando processes this, his young idealism crashing against the reality of the industry he'd been so eager to join. What happened to him, to Prospero? He disappeared, Alonso says. Took his daughter and vanished. Rumor was he bought some worthless island somewhere in the Caribbean with what little money Antonio couldn't freeze. Most people assumed he drank himself to death out here, bitter and broken. As if responding to the story, music begins to drift across the beach. It's different from what Antonio's group is hearing. Softer, more soulful. Classic R&B samples mixed with jazz elements. A kind of production that requires not just technical skill, but genuine artistry. A woman's voice croons over the beat, singing about redemption and second chances. Do you hear that? Fernando stands, scanning the tree line. Someone's here. Someone with serious equipment. The music seems to beckon them, a path of sound leading into the jungle. And there, at the edge of the trees where sand meets vegetation, Fernando sees her. A young woman, maybe his age, standing in dappled sunlight. She wears a flowing dress that moves in the breeze, her braided hair adorned with shells, her feet bare. She's the most beautiful thing Fernando has ever seen natural, unaffected by industry standards, radiant in a way that has nothing to do with makeup or styling. This is Miranda, though Fernando doesn't know her name yet. She regards him with curiosity and caution, like she's observing a species she's studied, but never encountered in person. Then she smiles just slightly and gestures for them to follow before disappearing into the jungle. Wait, Fernando calls out, already moving toward the trees. Alonso rises slowly, his guilt warring with his instinct for self-preservation, but he follows his son. They step into the jungle, and the island swallows them whole. Antonio's group follows the silent dancers deeper into the jungle, where the path becomes more defined, almost maintained. Solar-powered lights are strung through trees, disguised as natural elements, but clearly intentional. Speakers hide in hollowed logs and behind rock formations, creating an immersive soundscape that shifts as they walk. One moment classic boom-bap, the next a jazz fusion, then a reggae rhythm that speaks to the Caribbean setting. The path opens suddenly into what can only be described as an outdoor amphitheater. Natural stone formations create tiered seating around a central stage area where more equipment sits, drum machines, samplers, microphones on stands, all of it weatherproofed and powered by an invisible source. The trees overhead form a natural canopy, and hanging from the branches are old-school album covers encased in protective plastic. Paid in full, it takes a nation of millions, the chronic, Illmatic, the canon of hip-hop excellence displayed like religious icons. The dancers arrange themselves on the stone tiers, sitting in perfect formation, watching the executives with expressions that suggest they're the audience, and Antonio's group is the unwilling performance. Sebastian tries to speak to one of them, a young man in a bright yellow cross-colors outfit, but receives only a knowing smile in return. "This is somebody's temple," Gonzalo observes, his voice hushed with something approaching reverence. "Someone's been living here, building this for years." Antonio walks to the center of the amphitheater, his wet clothes clinging to him, his usual confidence stripped away by confusion and growing dread. The stone beneath his feet has been carved with words lyrics, he realizes. Classic lines from legendary tracks, mixed with original verses he's never seen before. Poetry about betrayal, about exile, about transformation and revenge. "I know you're watching." Antonio shouts to the trees, to the speakers, to whoever is orchestrating this. "I don't know what game this is, but I'm done playing. Show yourself." The response is immediate and overwhelming. Every speaker in the amphitheater erupts with sound, not music, but a cacophony of sampled voices. News reports from 1985 about Tempest Records' collapse. Legal testimonies from the corporate hearings. Antonio's own voice making promises to Prospero, swearing loyalty, calling his brother his best friend. Then lawyers reading the injunction that locked Prospero out of his own company. The sound builds and builds, a wall of audio guilt that drives Antonio to his knees, hands over his ears. Then silence. And in that silence, footsteps. Someone walking down from the upper tiers of the amphitheater. The executives turn to see him, a young man, beautiful and confident, moving with a dancer's grace. Ariel Wright descends like an angel or a messenger, his Coogie sweater a riot of colors, his gold jewelry catching the filtered sunlight, his expression serene and slightly amused. "Gentlemen," Ariel says, his voice smooth and melodious, "welcome to the island. My name is Ariel, and I've been instructed to serve as your host during your unexpected visit." He speaks with the cadence of someone equally comfortable with poetry and business, street wisdom and formal education. "Where are we?" Gonzalo asks, always the practical one. "Who's in charge here?" Ariel smiles. "You're on Tempest Island." Fitting name, don't you think? As for who's in charge, he gestures broadly at the amphitheater, the equipment, the watching dancers. The man who owns this place values his privacy, but he knows all of you. Knows you very well, actually. Antonio rises slowly, studying Ariel's face. "Prospero. This is Prospero's island. He's alive. He's here." "Smart man," Ariel acknowledges. "Took you long enough, though. I expected the great Antonio de Luca to be quicker on the uptake." The mockery in his voice is gentle but unmistakable. "Yes," Prospero di Luca not only survived, but thrived. Everything you see here, he built it. And now, after 12 years, you've come home to face the music. Literally, Sebastian steps forward, aggressively. Listen, kid, I don't know what my brother did to your boss, but we need communication equipment. You need nothing, Ariel interrupts, his voice hardening. You need to listen. You need to remember. You need to understand what you took and what he built from nothing. He pulls out a remote, sleek, custom-made, covered in buttons and dials. See, Prospero spent 12 years mastering not just music, but technology, psychology, nature itself. This island is his instrument, and he plays it like Coltrane played the saxophone. You're going to experience things here that will make you question reality. That's the point. He presses a button and the dancers rise in unison, surrounding the executives. They're not threatening, just present, a reminder that Antonio's group is outnumbered and outmatched. Another button press, and a massive screen descends from the canopy, a projection surface made of treated fabric. Images begin to play. A slideshow of Tempest records in its glory days, Prospero in the studio with legendary artists, gold records being presented, magazine covers, concert footage. The executives watch their own history, their own crime, documented in painful detail. Meanwhile, Fernando and Alonso push through the jungle foliage, following glimpses of Miranda's flowing dress ahead. The path she takes them on is gentler than Antonio's rot, more like a guided meditation than a forced march. Flowers bloom in impossible profusion: orchids, hibiscus, birds of paradise. The sound here is different, too. Birdsong mixed with distant ocean waves and occasional musical phrases that drift like incense through the air. They emerge into a garden that seems transported from paradise. Raised beds grow vegetables and herbs in organized rows. Fruit trees provide shade and sustenance. A small waterfall feeds into a clear pool where koi fish swim in lazy circles. Bamboo structures create seating areas and shade pavilions. This is where Miranda has spent 12 years learning to live with the land rather than against it. She stands by the pool, waiting for them, no longer retreating. Up close, Fernando can see the intelligence in her eyes, the strength in her posture. This is not some island primitive, but a young woman who's chosen this life, who's been shaped by it into something unique. You're not from around here, she says, and there's amusement in her voice. Her accent is pure New York, despite the setting. Obviously, the yacht, the clothes, the whole vibe. You're from his world, Alonso asks carefully. The music industry. Corporate America. The place my father left behind. Miranda sits on a smooth stone bench, gesturing for them to join her. He said they'd come, eventually. The men who destroyed him. I didn't believe it, thought he was holding on to old pain. But here you are, delivered by a storm that shouldn't exist. Fernando sits, drawn to her despite his confusion. Your father, is he Prospero di Luca? Miranda nods. I'm Miranda. And before you ask, yes, he caused that storm. Yes, he brought you here. And yes, he has a plan. I don't agree with all of it, but I understand why. You carry guilt, especially you. She looks directly at Alonso, who flinches. I can see it on your face. You know what you did. Alonso's composure finally breaks. I'm sorry. If he's here, if he's listening, please tell him I'm sorry. I've regretted it every day for 12 years. The money, the success, none of it was worth what we did to him. Miranda studies him with eyes that seem older than her 20 years. Sorry is a start, she says quietly. But my father didn't bring you here for apologies. He brought you here for transformation. Night falls on Tempest Island with a swiftness that surprises the executives. One moment the sun is filtering through the canopy, and the next, darkness wraps around everything like a velvet curtain. But the island doesn't go dark. It transforms. Solar-powered lights activate throughout the jungle, creating pathways of soft blue and green illumination. The speakers shift to evening programming, playing down-tempo beats and lo-fi hip-hop that drifts through the trees like smoke. Antonio's group has been led to what Ariel calls the guest compound, a series of bamboo structures built with surprising sophistication. Each hut features a comfortable bed with mosquito netting, solar lanterns, changes of clothes, and their sizes hanging from bamboo racks. There's running water from a gravity-fed system, toilets that compost, even a communal shower area with hot water heated by solar collectors. It's rustic but comfortable, the work of someone who understands both survival and civilization. "This is insane," Sebastian mutters, examining a pair of fresh cargo shorts and a polo sport t-shirt that fits him perfectly. How does he know our sizes? How long has he been planning this? Gonzalo sits on his bed, holding a book he found on the small bamboo knitstand. It's a journal, leather-bound, filled with handwritten entries. The first page reads, "Day 1 on Tempest Island. Miranda asks why we had to leave home. I tell her we're going on an adventure. I don't tell her we're refugees, exiles, the walking dead. Tomorrow, we build something new." The entries are dated starting 12 years ago, documenting Prospero's journey from broken businessman to island shaman. "He wants us to understand," Gonzalo says quietly. "That's what all of this is about. He's not just punishing us, he's teaching us." Antonio paces outside his hut, unable to settle. The jungle at night is alive with sounds, insects chirping, nocturnal birds calling, the distant crash of waves. But underneath it all, almost subliminal, there's music. Always music. Beats that pulse like a heartbeat. Samples that drift past like memories. Scratching that sounds like the island itself is a turntable, and the needle skating across grooves of guilt and consequence. Antonio De Luca. The voice comes from the darkness beyond the compound lights. Not processed through speakers this time, but live, human, familiar. Antonio's blood runs cold because he knows that voice, would know it anywhere, hasn't heard it in 12 years, but has never forgotten it. From the shadows, Prospero emerges. He's not the broken man Antonio left behind. This Prospero is transformed, lean and powerful, his dreadlocks hanging past his shoulders, his face weathered but strong, his eyes burning with an intensity that's both terrifying and magnetic. He wears his vintage Stussy jacket over a faded Africa Bambaataa t-shirt, cargo pants with pockets, full of mysterious equipment, Adidas superstars that have walked miles of island paths. Around his neck, those multiple chains catch the light gold, silver, symbols of power from traditions old and new. Antonio tries to speak, but no words come. Sebastian steps protectively beside his brother, but stops when Prospero raises a hand not threatening, just commanding attention. 12 years, Prospero says, his Brooklyn accent unchanged, his voice carrying the weight of every day spent in exile. 12 years I've been waiting for. This moment, dreaming about it, planning it. You want to know if I'm going to kill you? If this is revenge? He laughs, a sound without humor. Nah, man. Death would be too easy, too quick. What I got planned for you is much more profound. Prospero, listen. Antonio finally finds his voice. No, you listen. Prospero cuts him off, his voice rising. You stole my company, my legacy, my life's work. You turned my artists against me, poisoned my reputation, took everything I built with my own hands, and put your name on it. You know what the worst part was? Not the money, not the success. It was that you were my brother, my blood, the person I trusted most in the world. The other executives have emerged from their huts, drawn by the confrontation. They watch as Antonio faces his past made flesh. Gonzalo clutches the journal tighter. Francisco and Adrian stand frozen, realizing they're witnessing something ancient and primal brotherly betrayal and the reckoning that follows. I was wrong, Antonio says, and his voice cracks. I was young, ambitious, stupid. I convinced myself you weren't business-minded enough that I could run things better. But the truth? I was jealous. Jealous of your talent, your connection to the music, the way artists loved you. I wanted what you had, and I took it the only way I knew how. Prospero stares at his brother, and for a moment something flickers across his face pain. Recognition, the shadow of love that once existed between them. Then it hardens again. That's a start. That's step one. But confession ain't. Absolution, brother. You want forgiveness? You're going to have to earn it. You're going to have to become someone worthy of it. He produces a remote similar to Ariel's and presses a button. The speakers throughout the compound come alive with a new track something Prospero produced himself. Clearly, his signature sound evolved and perfected over 12 years of isolation. The beat is complex, layered, incorporating sounds from the island itself. Waves, birds, wind through trees, all sampled and transformed into rhythm. Tomorrow, Prospero says, your real education begins. Tonight, you rest. You read those journals. You think about what you've done and who you've become. And you prepare to face yourselves in ways you never imagined possible. He looks at each of them in turn, Antonio, Sebastian, Gonzalo, the younger executives. This island is my instrument, and all of you are going to dance to my tune. But here's the thing. I'm not conducting a tragedy. I'm composing a redemption arc. Whether you complete it or crash out halfway through, that's on you. With that, he turns and walks back into the jungle, disappearing into darkness and music, leaving Antonio's group standing in stunned silence. The beat continues, pulsing through the night, a reminder that Prospero is always watching, always orchestrating, the wizard of this strange new world they've stumbled into. In Miranda's garden, the atmosphere is gentler, but no less intense. She's given Fernando and Alonso shelter in a guest pavilion near the main compound where she and her father live. They sit around a small fire pit, flames dancing between them, eating fresh fish that Miranda grilled with herbs from her garden. The food is simple but delicious, a reminder that survival and sophistication aren't mutually exclusive. Fernando can't stop watching Miranda. She moves with such grace, such confidence in her environment. She's nothing like the industry girls he knew in Los Angeles, the aspiring models, the video dancers, the executives, daughters playing at Rebellion. Miranda is genuinely herself, untouched by the artifice that Antonio's world demands. How do you live like this? Fernando asks. No TV, no radio stations, no clubs, no civilization? Miranda laughs. We have all of that, just our versions. My father built a recording studio that would make any producer in Manhattan jealous. We have satellite internet limited, but functional. We get news, music, culture. We're not primitive, Fernando. We're just selective. We chose quality over quantity, meaning over noise. And you're happy? He presses. You never wanted to leave, see the world, live normally? Miranda counters, her eyes challenging him. Define normal. Is normal working 80 hours a week to buy things you don't need? Is normal stepping on people to climb corporate ladders? Is normal what your father did to mind destroying a good man for profit? Her voice isn't angry, just matter of fact, which somehow makes it worse. Alonso sets down his plate, appetite gone. She's right, Fernando. Everything I taught you about success, about business, it's poisoned. I built our distribution empire on lies and betrayal, and I've been trying to justify it ever since. Morning arrives with the sound of birds and a fresh beat leading through the jungle. Speakers, something up-tempo and hopeful, a tribe called Quest-style production with jazz samples and positive energy. Antonio wakes disoriented, forgetting for a moment where he is, then remembering with a crushing weight. He's on Prospero's island. His past has finally caught him. Outside his hut, breakfast waits on a bamboo table, fresh fruit, grilled fish, coconut water, and halved shells. Even coffee brewed strong and dark. Ariel sits nearby, looking fresh in a vintage members-only jacket and Gerba jeans, eating mango slices like he has all the time in the world. Morning, sunshine, Ariel greets Antonio cheerfully. Sleep well? Dream about your sins? Today's the day your real education starts. Prospero's got a whole curriculum planned. Where is he? Antonio demands, pouring himself coffee from an insulated thermos that stays mysteriously hot. Around, everywhere. You'll see him when he wants to be seen. Ariel stands, stretching. But first, a tour. You need to understand what your brother built while you were living off his stolen legacy. The tour is designed to humble. Ariel leads Antonio, Sebastian, and Gonzalo through the island compound, showing them the recording studio first. It's built into a natural cave system, climate-controlled and acoustically perfect. Inside, equipment worth millions lines the walls, vintage gear Prospero salvaged and maintained. Modern digital systems he somehow acquired despite his isolation, mixing boards that look like spacecraft control panels. The walls display platinum records from the old Tempest Records days, but also new ones, tracks Prospero produced under pseudonyms and sold to artists through intermediaries, hits that topped charts without anyone knowing their real creator. He's been ghost producing for years, Ariel explains, running his hands over a vintage SP to 1200. Some of the biggest tracks of the 90s? Your brother made them. He just never took credit, never wanted to step back into that world. The money goes to maintaining this place, funding equipment, taking care of business. That's impossible, Sebastian argues. We would have known. The industry talks. The industry knows what it's told, Ariel counters. Prospero knows every trick because he invented half of them. He's a ghost in the machine, a legend operating in shadows. While you were putting your name on his old work, he was creating the future. They move to the Technology Center, a building housing servers, satellite equipment, solar battery arrays, water purification systems, even a small medical clinic with supplies and equipment. Everything is organized, maintained, functional. This isn't a hermit's retreat. It's a self-sufficient kingdom built on knowledge and patience. 12 years, Gonzalo breathes, examining a wall of technical manuals and reference books. He learned all of this in 12 years. He learned it because he had to, Ariel says. Because you took everything and left him with nothing but his daughter and his determination. Necessity is the mother of innovation, and betrayal is the father of evolution. The tour ends at the amphitheater from yesterday, but in daylight it looks different, less threatening, more like a university lecture hall open to sky. The stone tiers are carved with more lyrics, more wisdom from hip-hop's philosophers. Prospero waits in the center, setting up equipment, preparing something. Gentlemen, he greets them without looking up. Welcome to school. Today's lesson: understanding what you destroyed and what you became in the process. He presses play on a sampler, and sound fills the amphitheater, not music, but voices. Interviews with the original Tempest Records artists, talking about how the label changed after Antonio took over, how the creative freedom disappeared, how profit became the only motive, how the soul of the music died under corporate restructuring. Some of these artists are legends now, but in these recordings they sound heartbroken, talking about losing their mentor, their champion, their voice. Antonio stands rigid, forced to hear what his ambition cost beyond just his brother. The artists who trusted Prospero also lost something when Antonio staged his coup. The culture itself lost something. You didn't just take my company, Prospero says quietly, finally looking at Antonio. You changed what it stood for. Tempest Records was about art, about giving voice to the voiceless, about pushing boundaries. Under you, it became just another corporation, squeezing profit from culture without giving back. In Miranda's garden, Fernando helps with morning chores, watering plants, harvesting vegetables, feeding the koi. It's manual labor, something he's never really done, and his hands are already blistering. But he doesn't complain because Miranda works beside him, teaching him about each plant, each system, the delicate balance of the garden ecosystem. Everything here serves multiple purposes, she explains, showing him a papaya tree. Food, obviously, but the leaves have medicinal properties. The wood can be used for building. The roots prevent erosion. You don't just take from nature, you work with it, create relationships, understand interdependence. Like the music industry should work, Fernando realizes. Artists, labels, distributors, audiences, everyone supporting each other instead of extracting value. Exactly. Miranda smiles at his understanding. My father taught me that. He says music is like ecology. When one part of the system becomes parasitic, the whole thing suffers. That's what happened with Tempest Records. Antonio became a parasite, taking without creating, profiting without contributing. Alonso joins them, looking older in the morning light, the weight of his guilt visible in every line of his face. Miranda, I need to speak with your father. I need to apologize properly, offer restitution, something. He knows you're sorry, Miranda says gently, but sorry doesn't rebuild what was destroyed. He wants to see if you can become something different, something better. That's why you're here, not for punishment, but for potential transformation. She leads them to a pavilion where musical instruments are laid out, drums, a keyboard, a bass guitar, even turntables and a basic mixer. My father believes music reveals truth. He wants you to create something. Not for profit, not for charts, but for expression. When's the last time either of you made music just because it needed to exist? Fernando picks up drumsticks tentatively. I've never made music at all. Just documented it, packaged it, sold it. Then today you start, Miranda says. Today you learn what your business is actually supposed to serve, the art itself, the expression, the human need to create and connect. Alonso sits at the keyboard, his fingers hovering over keys he hasn't touched since college, before business school, before he learned to see music as units and profit margins instead of beauty and truth. He presses a key middle C and the pure tone rings out across the garden. Something in his chest cracks open, years of calcified ambition beginning to crumble. The afternoon sun beats down on the amphitheater where Prospero has Antonio's group engaged in what can only be described as musical therapy. Each executive has been given an instrument or piece of equipment, turntables for Antonio, an MPC sampler for Sebastian, a microphone for Gonzalo. The younger executives, Francisco and Adrian, sit with notebooks, instructed to write verses about their experiences in the industry. Music isn't about technique, Prospero lectures, pacing the stone stage like a professor. It's about honesty. You can have all the technical skill in the world, but if you're not speaking truth, you're just making noise. Today, you're going to make something honest, something that reflects who you really are, not who you pretend to be. Antonio stands at the turntables, staring at them like they're foreign objects. He hasn't actually touched production equipment in years, hasn't needed to. He signs checks, makes calls, attends meetings. The creative work had delegated long ago to people like Ariel, young hungry producers, who do the real work while executives take credit. I don't remember how, Antonio admits quietly. Then remember, Prospero says, not unkindly. I taught you once, back when we were kids, in Brooklyn, before business school corrupted you, before you learned to see music as product instead of purpose. You used to have ears, Antonio. You used to feel the beat. Find that person again. Antonio places his hands on the turntable, feeling the vinyl under his fingers. Prospero has selected records for him, old soul samples, the same kind they used to dig through crates for in the 80s, searching for that perfect break, that magical moment to loop and transform. Antonio starts the record spinning, finds a groove, lets it play. The sound is warm, analog, human. A woman's voice singing about loss and hope. His hands move almost without conscious thought, muscle memory from decades ago awakening. He starts to scratch, gently at first, then with growing confidence. Sebastian watches his brother, seeing someone he hasn't seen in years, the Antonio who loved music before he learned to weaponize it. Prospero nods approval. There it is. That's the start. Now build on it. Show me what 12 years of guilt sounds like. The dancers who populate the island gather in the amphitheater, filling the stone tiers. Up close, the executives realize these aren't holograms or illusions. They're real young people, aspiring artists who somehow found their way to Prospero's island. Runaways, refugees from the industry's machinery, kids who heard rumors of a legendary producer living off-grid and made pilgrimages to find him. This is Prospero's real legacy, not a company or a catalog, but a community of artists learning. Outside the corporate system, Ariel moves among them, conducting, encouraging, his role as Prospero's lieutenant clear. He's been where they are, lost, desperate, seeking something authentic in an industry built on exploitation. Prospero saved him, taught him, transformed him. Now he helps do the same for others. This is what Tempest Records was supposed to become, Gonzalo realizes watching the young artists. Not a corporation, but a movement, a school, a community. That was always Prospero's vision, Ariel confirms. Antonio turned it into a money machine. But out here, away from Billboard charts and Nielsen ratings, the original dream survived. These kids learn production, songwriting, business ethics, how to maintain artistic integrity while still making a living. When they leave, they're equipped to change the industry from within. The music session continues into late afternoon. Antonio creates a simple loop, then adds layers. Sebastian contributes bass. Gonzalo speaks improvised poetry about regret and redemption over the track. Francisco and Adrian trade verses they've written about their experiences exploiting young artists. It's raw, imperfect, but honest, in a way none of them have been in years. Prospero listens with his eyes closed, head nodding to the rhythm. When the track finishes, he opens his eyes and looks at his brother. That's the most real thing you've made in 12 years. It's not good, yet you're rusty. Your instincts are dulled by disuse. But it's honest. That's where reconstruction begins. In the garden pavilion, Fernando and Alonso have spent hours creating their own music under Miranda's patient guidance. Alonso discovered he still remembers piano from childhood, and his fingers produce melodies that surprise him, beautiful, melancholic phrases that express what words cannot. Fernando has natural rhythm, his drum patterns simple but effective, providing foundation for his father's improvisations. Music is conversation, Miranda explains. You're talking to each other without words, expressing feelings that are too complex for language. This is what the industry forgets. Music isn't product, it's communication. It's human connection made audible. Fernando watches his father play, seeing him truly vulnerable for the first time. Alonso's face shows everything he's held inside for 12 years: guilt, shame, loss, hope for redemption. The music pours it all out, and Fernando realizes this is what his documentary footage could never capture: the internal transformation, the soul work, the genuine change. That can only happen when ego gets stripped away. I want to stay longer, Fernando says suddenly. Not just long enough to get rescued, but really stay. Learn from Prospero. Learn from you. He looks at Miranda, and she sees his sincerity. That's not my decision, Miranda says. My father brought you here for a reason. When that purpose is fulfilled, he'll decide what happens next. But wanting to change, that's the first real step. As evening approaches, both groups, Antonio's in the amphitheater, Fernando and Alonso in the garden, continue making music. The sounds drift across the island, mixing with bird calls and ocean waves, creating an unintentional symphony. Prospero stands alone on his cliff, listening to everything, monitoring the transformation he's orchestrated. 12 years he's waited for this. 12 years of exile, planning, growing. Now his enemies are becoming students. Their punishment is education, and revenge is transforming into something higher: restoration, redemption, renaissance. But the hardest part is still coming. Tomorrow they'll face the deepest truths. Tomorrow decisions will be made that determine everyone's future. Tonight, though, there's just music and the possibility of change hanging in the Caribbean air like humidity before rain. Day 3 on Tempest Island begins differently. The usual morning beats are absent, replaced by an unsettling silence broken only by natural sounds: waves, birds, wind through palm fronds. Antonio wakes to find a package outside his hut, a vintage Walkman with a cassette tape inside, labeled in Prospero's handwriting, "Listen alone. Face yourself." He presses play with trembling fingers. The tape contains recordings from 1985, conversations between him and Prospero that Antonio thought were lost to time. His brother's voice, young and trusting, discussing plans for Tempest Records' future. "We're going to change the game together, Tony. Brothers forever, right?" And Antonio's own voice responding, "Forever, Pro. I got your back always." The lie sounds poisonous now, knowing what came next. But the tape doesn't stop there. It continues with recordings Antonio didn't know existed, phone conversations with Alonso Martinez plotting the takeover, Antonio coaching Sebastian on how to turn the board members against Prospero, late-night strategy sessions, where Antonio practiced the lies he'd tell. His own voice, cold and calculated, saying things like, "He's too soft for this business. Sentiment is his weakness, and we'll use it to bury him." Antonio rips the headphones off, but the damage is done. He's been forced to hear himself as he truly was not an ambitious businessman making hard decisions, but a betrayer, a snake, a man who weaponized love against the person who loved him most. He stumbles outside, gasping for air, and finds the others emerging from their huts with similar expressions of devastation. They each received their own tapes, their own confrontations with recorded truth. "He's documenting us like we're specimens," Francisco whispers, looking haunted. "My tape had conversations with artists I exploited, promises I made and broke, lies I told to steal publishing rights. Mine was worse," Adrian adds, his usual cocky demeanor shattered. "It was my own diary entries from the last 5 years, but someone else was reading them back to me, hearing my thoughts spoken out loud. The casual cruelty, the way I talk about artists, like they're products to be mined and discarded." Gonzalo sits heavily on a bench, his tape player still clutched in his hand. He recorded board meetings, things I said about Prospero to justify the takeover. I convinced myself I was being pragmatic, doing what was necessary, but hearing it now, I was complicit in destroying a good man's life, and I did it with spreadsheets and corporate doublespeak. Ariel appears on the path, his expression serious today, the playful energy replaced by something more intense. He wears all black, a vintage Carhartt jacket, dark jeans, black Timbs, like he's dressed for a funeral. "Prospero wants to see all of you." At the main house, it's time for the final confrontation, the ultimate truth. This is where you decide who you really are. They follow him in silence through jungle paths now familiar, past the amphitheater and studio, past gardens and solar arrays to a building they haven't seen before. The main house is stunning modern architecture blended with natural materials. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean, a wraparound deck, inside visible through glass walls. The interior features exposed wood beams, minimalist furniture, covered with photographs documenting 12 years of island life, Miranda growing from child to woman, Prospero transforming from exile to master. Prospero waits in the main room, standing before a massive mixing board that dominates one wall. But this isn't just audio equipment, it's integrated with video screens, computer monitors, all showing different feeds from cameras hidden throughout the island. This is the control center, the place where Prospero has orchestrated everything, watching them, recording them, conducting his elaborate performance. "Welcome to the bridge," Prospero says, gesturing at the equipment. "This is where the captain steers the ship, where the producer crafts the track, where the playwright directs the performance. You've been my subjects for 3 days now. I've watched you sleep, eat, create, suffer. I've documented your transformation or your failure to transform. Now it's time for judgment. He presses buttons, and the screens fill with footage of the past 3 days. Antonio at the turntables, his face showing genuine emotion for the first time in years. Sebastian crying alone in his hut after listening to his tape. Gonzalo writing in a journal, pages and pages of confessions and apologies. The younger executives attempting to make music, their awkward sincerity captured in high definition. I could destroy you with this footage, Prospero says calmly. Release it to the media, show the industry who you really are behind the suits and swagger. Your confessions, your breakdowns, your guilt, it would end your careers, expose you as the frauds and betrayers you've been. That was the plan once, total exposure. Complete revenge. Antonio finds his voice. Then do it. I deserve it. We all do, but Prospero, before you destroy me, let me say what I should have said 12 years ago. I'm sorry. Not sorry I got caught. Not sorry for the consequences, but genuinely sorry for the hurt I caused you, for the betrayal, for stealing your dream and corrupting it. You trusted me, and I used that trust as a weapon. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know becoming who I became has been its own punishment. Every success felt hollow. Every platinum record was a reminder of what I stole. You think these 3 days have been hard? Try living 12 years knowing you destroyed the person who loved you most. Prospero's face is unreadable. He picks up a remote and presses a button. On the screens, new footage appears not of the executives, but of Miranda and Fernando. They're in the garden, talking, laughing, making music together. The connection between them is obvious, beautiful, the natural chemistry of two young people discovering each other untainted by industry, politics, or family history. My daughter has fallen for Alonso Martinez's son, Prospero says, and there's something vulnerable in his voice now. The son of the man who helped destroy me. I should hate that. I should forbid it. But watching them together, seeing Miranda happy, it's changing something in me, making me question everything I planned. The revelation hangs in the air like a suspended cord waiting to resolve. Antonio looks at the screens showing Miranda and Fernando together, and something shifts in his expression, not calculation, but genuine concern for consequences beyond his own fate. Does she know? Antonio asks. About Fernando's father, about what Alonso did? She knows everything, Prospero confirms. I've never hidden the truth from her, but she's choosing to see Fernando for who he is, not who his father was. She's offering grace I never taught her to give. She learned that on her own, from the island, from nature, from being untouched by the bitterness I carried. Alonso appears in the doorway, breathing hard like he's been running. Fernando is with him, and Miranda stands between them and her father, protective, defiant, her bare feet planted firmly on the polished concrete floor. She's wearing a vintage TLC t-shirt over her flowing skirt, a bridge between her father's world and her own evolution. Dad, we need to talk, Miranda says, her voice steady despite the tension. Not as your student or your daughter, but as an equal. What you're doing here, I understand it. I support parts of it. But it can't end in destruction. It has to end in transformation, or everything you've built on this island becomes just another revenge story, just another cycle of hurt. Prospero looks at his daughter, really looks at her, and everyone in the room can see the war happening behind his eyes. 12 years of pain and planning versus 20 years of love for the young woman who's become his conscience. You don't know what they took from us, Prospero says, but his voice lacks its earlier certainty. I know exactly what they took, Miranda counters. I was there. I remember the apartment in Manhattan, the office, the parties, the life we had. But, Dad, I also remember what we found here. Peace, purpose, community. You taught me that suffering can be a teacher, that loss can lead to transformation. Are you going to deny them the same lessons you learned? Fernando steps forward carefully, aware he's walking into dangerous territory. Mr. De Luca, I can't apologize for my father's actions, but I can promise that what I've learned here in 3 days has changed everything I thought I knew about this business, about success, about what matters. Miranda has shown me, both of you have shown me, that there's another way, a better way. Alonso moves beside his son, and his voice is raw with emotion. Prospero, I destroyed you because I was afraid. Afraid that if I didn't take Antonio's deal, someone else would. Afraid that loyalty and integrity would leave me behind while ruthless men conquered the industry. I chose pragmatism over principle, and it's haunted me every single day since. I don't ask forgiveness, I ask for the chance to make amends. Use me. Let me testify about what Antonio and I did. Let me expose the corruption we practiced. I'll burn my own reputation to ash if it means restoring yours. Prospero walks to the windows overlooking the ocean, his back to everyone. The silence stretches, filled only with the distant sound of waves. When he speaks, his voice is quiet, contemplative. I brought you here to face justice, my justice. I wanted you to feel powerless, like I felt powerless. I wanted you to understand what you took, and you do. I can see it, hear it, feel it. The guilt is real. The transformation is beginning. But Miranda's right. If I destroy you now, I become exactly what you were, someone who uses power to hurt rather than heal. He turns back to face them, and there are tears on his face, the first vulnerability he's shown. Antonio, you're my brother. That never stopped being true, even when I hated you. Sebastian, you followed him because that's what little brothers do. I understand that better than anyone. Gonzalo, you were trying to save the company the only way you knew how. And Alonso, you were surviving in a corrupt system, doing what you thought you had to do. So what happens now? Antonio asks. What's the verdict? Prospero moves back to his mixing board, his fingers dancing over the controls. On the screens, new images appear, documents, contracts, legal papers. I've spent 12 years not just building this place, but building leverage. Every shady deal Milano Records made under your leadership, every artist you exploited, every copyright you stole, every tax you evaded, I documented it. I have evidence that could end all of you, send some of you to prison, bankrupt the company. The executives' faces go pale. Even Gonzalo, who thought he understood the scope of Prospero's planning, looks shocked. But Prospero continues. I also have a different proposal, a choice. You can leave this island, return to your lives, and I'll release everything, expose you, destroy you, salt the earth of your careers. Or you can stay, not as prisoners, but as students. For 6 months you work with me, learn from me, help me build something new, a new label, a collective, an alternative to the corporate machine that corrupted us all. You use your connections, your business knowledge, your resources, but under my guidance with my ethics, building something that serves artists instead of exploiting them. 6 months? Sebastian repeats. Just disappear from the industry for half a year? The official story will be that your yacht was destroyed. You survived on a deserted island, and you're recovering from trauma. Ariel explains, speaking for the first time. Not a lie, really. Just incomplete truth. Meanwhile, you'll be learning how to rebuild yourselves into men worthy of the power you hold. Gonzalo steps forward. And if we refuse? If we choose to leave and take our chances with the exposure? Then I release everything immediately, and you spend the next decade in courtrooms and possibly prison cells, Prospero says flatly. But I'll also lose the chance to actually fix the industry from within, and you'll lose the chance at genuine redemption. We all lose. The cycle continues. The room falls silent as the weight of Prospero's ultimatum settles over everyone. 6 months of transformation or a lifetime of consequences. It's not really a choice. It's an opportunity disguised as coercion, mercy wrapped in the language of leverage. Antonio looks at his brother across the distance of 12 years and 3 days of island purgatory. If I stay, if we do this, you'll really work with me after everything? You won't just be waiting for me to fail so you can destroy me anyway? I don't want to destroy you, Tony, Prospero says, using the childhood nickname for the first time since they've been reunited. I want to reconstruct you. I want my brother back, not the corporate shark you became, but the kid who used to stay up all night with me digging through crates, the one who understood that music is sacred, that culture is responsibility. That person is still in there somewhere. I saw glimpses of him yesterday when you were making that track, when your hands touched those turntables and remembered what they were for. Sebastian clears his throat, uncomfortable with emotion but forcing himself to speak. I followed Antonio, because that's what I always did. He was the smart one, the ambitious one. I was just muscle, just support. But these 3 days, I've had to think for myself, feel for myself, and what I feel is shame. Deep, heavy shame for what we did. If you're offering a chance to become something better, I'm taking it. Me too, Gonzalo adds immediately. I've spent 12 years as a coup trying to steer Milano Records toward ethical practices, failing more often than succeeding because the foundation was rotten. The chance to build something from the ground up with integrity from day one, that's worth 6 months. That's worth everything. Francisco and Adrian exchange glances, younger and less certain, but ultimately they nod. We're in, Francisco says. We don't have the history you all have, but we've seen enough in 3 days to know the industry needs to change. If we can be part of that change instead of perpetuating the damage, then it's settled, Prospero says, and something releases in his shoulders. Tension he's carried for 12 years finally beginning to ease. Tomorrow we start building the new Tempest. Not a label, but a collective. Not a corporation, but a community. We'll use your money, your connections, your infrastructure, but we'll do it right this time. Artists will own their masters. Producers will get fair credit. Everyone will understand they're stewards of culture, not extractors of profit. Alonso steps forward, Fernando beside him, Miranda watching both of them carefully. And us? Where do we fit in this plan? Prospero regards Alonso for a long moment, and the room holds its breath. This is personal in ways the others aren't. Alonso wasn't family, wasn't even directly employed by Tempest Records. His betrayal was purely mercenary, purely about profit. It should be harder to forgive. You, Prospero says slowly, are going to revolutionize distribution. You're going to use Urban Groove's infrastructure to create a system that's transparent, fair, that pays artists what they're actually owed instead of what you can get away with. You're going to turn your company into a model for how distribution should work, not extractive, but supportive. Think you can do that? Yes, Alonso says without hesitation. I've wanted to for years, but lacked the courage and the catalyst. You're giving me both. And Fernando, Prospero continues, looking at the young man who holds his daughter's heart, you're going to document everything. Not for gossip, not for exposure, but for education. You're going to create a documentary about how we rebuilt, how former enemies became collaborators, how the industry can transform. When we're done, your film will be a blueprint for others. That camera of yours will get you a new one. Use it for something that matters. Fernando's eyes light up. A real documentary. Not industry propaganda, but truth. The whole process, the struggles, the failures, the successes. I can do that. I want to do that. Miranda moves to Fernando's side, taking his hand, and the gesture is simple but profound. Prospero watches his daughter claim her choice, her future, her right to love despite history and hurt. It's the final surrender of his revenge, the moment where control gives way to trust. Miranda, Prospero says gently, I owe you an apology too. I brought these people here planning destruction, and you showed me construction was possible. You've been teaching me while I thought I was teaching you. The island raised you to be wiser than your father. The island raised us both, Miranda corrects, crossing to embrace him. You taught me everything, about music, about culture, about power and responsibility. I just added one thing you'd forgotten: forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing we can do. As night falls on Tempest Island, the atmosphere shifts from confrontation to collaboration. Prospero opens his archives. 12 years of tracks, samples, productions that never saw official release. The executives listen in awe as piece after piece plays, realizing they're hearing the evolution of hip-hop's future, created in isolation by a genius they tried to erase. Tomorrow we start planning, Prospero announces. But tonight we celebrate. Not our past, that's complicated and painful for everyone here. We celebrate possibility, the chance to do better, be better, build better. Ariel has already anticipated this because of course he has. He's been learning from Prospero for 3 years, understanding not just the production techniques, but the psychology, the drama, the way moments need to be orchestrated. He triggers the island's sound system, and music floods from every speaker, a playlist of classics from hip-hop's golden age, the tracks that made them all fall in love with the culture before business corrupted it. The young artists who populate the island emerge from the jungle like spirits materializing, and suddenly the amphitheater is alive with people, with dancing, with joy. The executives are swept up in it. Even Antonio, stiff at first, eventually begins to move, remembering what it felt like to be young and in love with beats and rhymes before ambition poisoned everything. Fernando films it all on a camera Ariel provides, capturing the moment where enemies become colleagues, where destruction transforms into creation. Miranda dances with the island youth, her flowing dress spinning, her laughter rising above the music. Alonso sits with Gonzalo and Prospero, 3 older men who've been through wars, discussing the practical details of their new venture, but also tentatively, beginning to build something like friendship. Sebastian and Ariel end up in a cipher with the young artists, trading verses, Sebastian discovering he has a knack for lyrics he never explored. Francisco and Adrian sit at the mixing board, taking notes as various producers demonstrate techniques, eager students, where days ago they were arrogant exploiters. And Antonio and Prospero stand together on the edge of the celebration, watching everything. Two brothers with 12 years between them beginning to close the gap. "Thank you," Antonio says quietly, "for not destroying me, for seeing something salvageable in who I've become." "Thank Miranda," Prospero replies. "She's the one who saved you. I would have burned it all down. She showed me there's a better way to fight, not with destruction, but with construction. Not ending things, but transforming them." They stand in silence for a moment, then Prospero extends his hand. Antonio takes it, and the handshake becomes an embrace, awkward, tentative, but real. Brothers again, not reconciled completely, but beginning the long journey back to each other. 6 months pass on Tempest Island like a montage in a music video, time compressed but deeply felt, transformation happening in layers and stages. The Caribbean seasons shift subtly. Rainy periods that turn the jungle lush and impossibly green, dry spells where the sun beats down relentlessly, teaching patience and adaptation. Through it all, the work continues. The executives have been transformed from the outside in. Gone are the Hugo Boss suits and designer labels, replaced by practical island wear cargo shorts, vintage t-shirts, Timberlands worn for actual work rather than fashion. Their hands show calluses from building new studio structures, from maintaining solar panels, from the physical labor that grounds abstract concepts in concrete reality. Their faces are leaner, weathered by sun and honesty, the softness of corporate luxury burned away by purpose. Antonio has become Prospero's true partner in the way he should have been from the beginning. Every morning they meet in the main studio before dawn, drinking coffee and building tracks together. Prospero teaches, Antonio learns, and slowly the student remembers skills he buried under business school pragmatism. His ear returns that instinct for what works, what moves people, what matters. They've produced 17 tracks together, each one a dialogue between past and present, hurt and healing, exile and return. "Listen to this," Antonio says, adjusting a sample on the MPC. He's found a jazz record from 1967, a trumpet solo that speaks of longing and hope. He chops it, rearranges it, lays it over a drum pattern that Sebastian programmed. His brother has discovered a talent for rhythm that surprises everyone. The result is haunting and beautiful, nostalgic, but forward-looking. Prospero nods, adding a bass line that grounds everything. "That's it. That's the sound. You're feeling it again, Tony. You're hearing with your soul instead of your wallet." They work in comfortable silence now, the kind only possible between people who've hurt each other terribly and chosen reconstruction over abandonment. The wound is still there, probably always will be, but it's healing cleanly. No infection of resentment or false forgiveness. They've done the work, had the hard conversations, cried together more than once during late-night sessions where truth demanded tears. Sebastian has found his calling as the collective's rhythm architect. He spends hours with the young island artists, teaching them what he's learning, discovering that instruction deepens his own understanding. He's also become the physical operations manager, organizing the construction projects, managing supplies, coordinating the practical aspects of expanding the compound. His energy, once used for enforcement and intimidation, now builds instead of destroys. Gonzalo has taken on the role he was always meant for ethical operations officer. He spent 6 months drafting documents that will govern the new Tempest Collective. Contracts that favor artists, transparent accounting systems, dispute resolution, procedures that don't require lawyers. He works with Alonso on distribution models that eliminate the traditional exploitation. Creating spreadsheets that prove fairness can be profitable if you're willing to accept reasonable returns instead of extractive margins. The numbers work, Gonzalo announces one afternoon, spreading papers across a bamboo table in the main pavilion. If we cap executive salaries at a reasonable multiple of the lowest paid employee, if we give artists ownership of their masters and fair royalty rates, if we invest in development rather than marketing manipulation, we can be sustainable. Not billionaire-making, but healthy, growing, ethical. Show me. Prospero leans over the spreadsheets, and Alonso joins them, the 3 former enemies now collaborating on mathematics that could reshape an industry. Francisco and Adrian, the youngest of the group, have become evangelists for the cause. They spend their days with the island artists, learning their stories, understanding the exploitation they fled, documenting the alternative being built. Francisco has discovered he's a talented A and R when he's looking for art instead of commercial viability. His ear for genuine expression is sharp when profit isn't the filter. Adrian has become a social media strategist, planning how to tell the collective story. To a world that doesn't know it needs this alternative yet. We need to be ready for backlash, Adrian says during a strategy session. When we announce what we're building, the industry will attack. They'll call us naive, unrealistic, socialist. Whatever dismissive label kills, threats to the status quo. We need artists ready to testify, numbers ready to defend, a narrative that's bulletproof. Let them attack. Prospero says calmly, "We're not asking permission. We're not seeking approval. We're building an alternative, and artists who are tired of being exploited will find us. That's enough." Alonso Martinez has perhaps changed the most visibly. The guilt that haunted him has transformed into determined action. He spent 6 months dismantling and rebuilding Urban Groove distribution from the inside, auditing every contract, reaching out to artists he exploited, offering amended terms, returning money where he can document underpayment. Some artists accept his apologies and amendments. Others tell him where to go. He accepts both responses with equal grace, understanding that forgiveness isn't guaranteed, that amends don't erase harm, that the work matters regardless of recognition. "I contacted the original Tempest Records artists," Alonso tells Prospero one evening, the 2 of them, sitting on the cliff watching sunset paint the ocean gold and purple. The ones who got screwed when Antonio took over. "I offered to help them reclaim their masters, to use Urban Groove's resources to fight the legal battles. Some are interested, others they don't trust me. Can't blame them. The fact you're trying matters," Prospero says. "Redemption isn't a destination, Alonso. It's a direction. You just keep walking that path, regardless of whether anyone applauds." Fernando has become the conscience and chronicler of the collective. His documentary footage fills dozens of hard drives, hundreds of hours, capturing the transformation in progress. He films the morning production sessions, the difficult conversations about ethics and economics, the arguments and breakthroughs, the failures and successes. But he also captures the small moments, Antonio and Prospero laughing together over a shared memory, Sebastian teaching a teenager how to program drum patterns, Miranda working in her garden while humming melodies that become the next day's samples. His relationship with Miranda has deepened into something solid and genuine. They're young, still figuring out who they are individually, but they're doing it together. She teaches him about sustainability, about living in balance with environment and values. He teaches her about the outside world she left as a child, helping her understand the industry context her father rails against. They make music together, her voice, his production skills learned from Prospero, creating tracks that blend island peace with urban edge. I want to make sure the film shows the struggle, Fernando says during a planning meeting, not just the triumph. People need to see how hard this is, how many times you all wanted to quit, how tempting it would be to slip back into old patterns. The transformation has to look real, not romanticized. Show everything, Prospero agrees. The island doesn't hide truth, that's the whole point. The announcement comes on a morning in late 1998. Prospero gathers everyone in the amphitheater, the executives who came as prisoners and stayed as students, the young island artists who've been the collective's foundation, Ariel, who's been the bridge between all worlds, and Miranda, who's been the moral center of everything. It's time, Prospero says simply. 6 months was the agreement. The work here is done, or rather the work that can be done on this island is complete. The real work, the hard work, begins when you leave. When we take what we've built here and try to make it survive in the world that tried to destroy me. There's a yacht anchored in the bay, not a luxury vessel like the Milano records that brought them here, but a working boat, practical and functional. Ariel arranged it through his network of contacts, navigating the complexity of bringing the outside world back to the island without contaminating what they've created. We go back as different people, Antonio says, standing to address the group. But we go back to the same industry, the same corruption, the same pressures that made us who we were. How do we hold on to what we learned when everything out there will try to make us forget? You hold on to each other, Prospero answers. The collective isn't just a business structure, it's a support system. When one of you starts slipping back into old patterns, the others call it out. When the industry pressures you to compromise, you remind each other why we built this alternative. You're accountable to each other and to the artists we're supposed to serve. Miranda stands, her voice carrying across the amphitheater. My father brought you here thinking he wanted revenge, but the island taught all of us that transformation is more powerful than destruction. You've spent 6 months learning new ways to think, work, and create. Now you have to prove those lessons can survive outside paradise. That's the real test. The young island artists present each executive with gifts, handmade tokens to carry back to the mainland. Antonio receives a necklace made from shells and volcanic rock, blessed by the island's energy. Sebastian gets a drum stick carved from island wood, a reminder that rhythm is sacred. Gonzalo receives a journal bound in woven palm fronds, pages filled with wisdom from the collective's daily discussions. Francisco and Adrian each get bracelets made by the artists they worked with, physical connections to relationships that transcended exploitation. Alonso receives something different, a small box containing burned CDs, copies of all the music created on the island during these 6 months. So you never forget what real music sounds like, the young woman who presents it says. what it sounds like when profit isn't the poison. Fernando's gift is a hard drive containing backup footage from every artist on the island, their testimonies about why the collective matters, their stories of industry harm and island healing. Tell our truth, they instruct him. Make them see what's possible. The farewell gathering becomes a party, one last island celebration, before everyone scatters back to the complicated world. Music plays tracks created during the 6-month transformation, collaborations between former enemies and new friends, productions that showcase what's possible when creativity serves culture instead of capitalism. People dance, cry, make promises to stay connected, to not let the magic die when reality intrudes. Prospero and Antonio stand apart from the celebration for a moment. Two brothers on the edge of something uncertain and hopeful. I'm scared, Antonio admits. Scared that I'll get back to Manhattan and slip into old patterns. The industry runs on exploitation, fighting it from inside. I don't know if I'm strong enough. You won't be alone, Prospero reminds him. I'm coming with you. Not to the office. Not to the boardroom, but to New York. The island taught me what I needed to learn, but hiding here forever would make me a coward. If we're going to change the industry, I need to be in the arena, not watching from exile. This is news to Antonio, to everyone. You're leaving the island? After everything you built here? I'm not leaving it, I'm expanding it, Prospero clarifies. This place will always be here, a retreat, a training ground, a reminder of what's possible. Miranda will manage it, with Ariel. They'll continue developing young artists who need an alternative to industry exploitation. But me? I need to take the fight to the source. Open a Tempest collective office in Brooklyn, sign artists to fair deals. Prove that ethics and success aren't mutually exclusive. The prodigal producer returns, Antonio says with a slight smile. The industry will lose its mind. Prospero De Luca back from the dead, partnering with the brother who destroyed him. They won't know how to process it. Good, Prospero says firmly. Let them be confused. Confusion creates openings. While they're trying to understand what we're doing, we'll be doing it. Building infrastructure, signing artists, distributing music fairly, proving the model works. By the time they figure out how to attack us, we'll be too established to easily destroy. The departure morning arrives with mixed emotions. The yacht sits ready in the bay, supplies loaded, route planned. The young island artists line the beach, some tearful, all grateful. They've watched these executives transform from corporate predators to conscious collaborators, and the transformation gives them hope that change is possible for anyone willing to do the work. Miranda and Fernando stand in the surf, holding hands, facing the reality that he's leaving while she stays. They've known this moment was coming, but haven't wanted to acknowledge it. I'll come back, Fernando promises, every few months. Document the ongoing work. Bring news from the outside. Make sure you know what we're doing with what you taught me. I know you will, Miranda says, though her eyes betray her worry. Just don't forget who you are out there. The industry will try to seduce you back into old ways. Remember the garden. Remember that growth requires patience, that everything is connected, that taking without giving back creates death. I remember, Fernando pulls her close. You taught me to see differently. That doesn't disappear just because. I'm leaving paradise. Prospero approaches them, his bag packed, his island clothes replaced by something more suitable for New York vintage Rocawear jeans. A fresh white t-shirt, a leather jacket, Timberlands that split the difference between street and professional. He looks like a bridge between worlds, which is exactly what he needs to be. "Baby girl," he says to Miranda, "you sure about this? About staying here while I go back to the war zone?" "Completely sure," Miranda confirms. "Someone needs to maintain the island, keep training artists, preserve what we built. You go fight the external battle. I'll hold down the internal foundation. We're a team, Dad, just operating on different fronts." Ariel joins them, dressed in his signature colorful style, a bright Coogie sweater and fresh Jordans, ready to co-manage the island in Prospero's absence. "We got this, boss. Miranda and I will keep the collective's heart beating here while you rebuild its presence in the industry. You just make sure you don't let those corporate vampires turn you back into one of them." "Not possible," Prospero says, embracing his protege. "The island changed me permanently. I'm taking its lessons with me, not leaving them behind." The yacht pulls away from Tempest Island as the sun climbs higher, turning the water into liquid gold. Those departing stand on the deck, watching the island shrink in their wake, watching paradise recede, but carrying its lessons forward. Miranda and Ariel stand on the cliff, waving until the boat disappears over the horizon, then turn back to the work that never ends. The journey to Miami takes 2 days. During that time, the executives finalize plans, review documents Gonzalo prepared, rehearse the story they'll tell the industry. They were shipwrecked, survived on a deserted island, had time to reflect and re-evaluate everything. Not lies, just strategic editing. The full truth will emerge through Fernando's documentary, through the music they release, through the transformed way they operate. The media will dig, Francisco warns. They'll want details about the island, about what we did there, about how we survived. Let them dig, Prospero says. They'll find a producer who left the industry and built a retreat for artists. They'll find executives who had a near-death experience and emerged changed. These things happen. The industry has seen plenty of redemption arcs. Ours will just be more thorough than most. Miami appears on the horizon like a mirage, glass towers catching sunlight, cruise ships in port, the urban density they've been without for 6 months. The contrast with the island is jarring, almost painful. Pollution hangs, visible in the air. The sounds are mechanical, harsh, lacking the organic rhythms they've grown accustomed to. But this is the arena where change must happen, where the real battle begins. They dock at a private marina Alonso arranged. There are no cameras yet, no media. Circus, just the quiet return of men everyone thought were dead or missing. Antonio's first call is to Milano Records, to the interim CEO, who's been managing things. His second call is to a lawyer beginning the process of restructuring the company according to the new principles. This will take years, Gonzalo says as they drive through Miami toward the airport. Unwinding bad contracts, renegotiating deals, rebuilding trust with artists we exploited. The legal battles alone, so we fight for years, Antonio responds. The island taught us patience. Transformation doesn't have deadlines. 3 months later, Brooklyn. The Tempest Collective has its first official office, not in Manhattan's music district, but in a renovated brownstone in Bedford-Stuyvesant, the neighborhood where Prospero grew up. The building features studios on the first floor, offices on the second, and living space on the third, where Prospero has made his home base. The exterior mural was painted by island artists who came to the mainland, a massive piece depicting hip-hop's evolution from park jams to corporate exploitation to collective liberation. The press conference announcing the collective's formation draws massive attention. Prospero De Luca, legendary producer thought to be living in obscurity, returns with his brother Antonio at his side. They announce a new model for the music industry. Artist-owned masters, transparent accounting, fair royalty rates, collective decision-making, profit-sharing that flows down, not just up. The industry reacts with predictable skepticism. Trade publications call it idealistic, unsustainable, naive. Competing labels mock it as a publicity stunt. But artists pay attention, especially young artists tired of predatory contracts, tired of being treated as content rather than creators. Applications flood in. Producers, rappers, singers, DJs, all wanting to be part of something different. Fernando's documentary premieres at Sundance Film Festival in January 1999. Tempest, From Betrayal to Brotherhood, traces the entire journey, the storm, the island, the transformation, the return. Critics call it brutally honest, surprisingly hopeful, and a blueprint for restorative justice in corporate America. It wins the Documentary Grand Jury Prize and gets picked up for theatrical distribution. The film does what they hoped. It legitimizes their story, contextualizes their transformation, and provides proof that change is possible. Artists who were skeptical start taking meetings. Industry professionals tired of ethical compromise reach out. The collective grows from theory to movement. Alonso keeps his promise, restructuring urban groove distribution to operate transparently. Some of his old business partners walk away, unable to accept reduced margins. Others stay intrigued by the model, discovering that sustainable ethics can be profitable. He testifies before a congressional committee investigating industry practices, his confession and subsequent transformation making him credible in ways typical experts aren't. Back on Tempest Island, Miranda and Ariel continue the work. Young artists cycle through in 3-month residencies, learning production, ethics, sustainability. The island becomes legendary in underground circles, a mythical place where you go to find yourself, to learn what matters, to build skills without compromising soul. Not everyone who applies gets accepted. Not everyone who's accepted completes the program. But those who do emerge transformed, joining the collective's growing network. 2 years after the storm that started everything, Antonio and Prospero sit in the Brooklyn studio late at night, working on a track that will become the collective's anthem. It samples the thunder from that first storm turned into percussion. It layers testimonies from island artists, from executives who transformed, from skeptics who became believers. The beat is complex but accessible, the message clear but nuanced. You think we can really do this? Antonio asks. Change an entire industry? We already are, Prospero responds. Not overnight, not completely, but incrementally, undeniably. Every artist who signs a fair deal, every executive who chooses ethics over exploitation, every fan who supports the alternative, that's the industry changing. We're not trying to destroy the system. We're building a better option and letting people choose. The track plays back, and it sounds like victory, not the triumphant kind, but the hard-earned kind. The kind that requires facing truth, accepting consequences, doing the work, staying the course. It sounds like brothers who hurt each other learning to trust again. It sounds like an island holding its lessons. It sounds like the future of hip-hop, if enough people are brave enough to build it. Outside the studio window, Brooklyn sleeps and dreams. The city that birthed hip-hop, that watched it grow from park jams to global phenomenon to corporate commodity, now hosts its next evolution. The Tempest Collective isn't the only answer, isn't a magic solution, but it's a viable alternative. And sometimes an alternative is enough. Sometimes showing that another way is possible creates the space for change to happen. The storm that brought them together was Prospero's revenge and mercy, his destruction and creation, his end and beginning. But the real tempest was always internal, the storm of transformation, the turbulence of change, the chaos necessary for evolution. That storm continues, will always continue, because growth never stops, justice never finishes, the work never ends. But tonight in a Brooklyn studio, two brothers make music together. And that, after everything, is its own kind of magic, its own kind of triumph, its own kind of perfect ending and beginning.